Hi there. It's June the 23rd, and we're continuing our progress through the Acts of the Apostles, the book written by Luke as a sequel to his Gospel. And we're in chapter 15, and we're reading from verses 1 to 35. Now, this is a very important chapter. This is continuing the story of the Gentiles being welcomed in to the good news of salvation through Jesus, Messiah of Israel. But at the beginning of this chapter, we find that there is opposition from Christian believers who are Pharisees. And although the Christians have been welcomed, new Christians have been welcomed in, new disciples have been welcomed in, who are Gentiles, they are saying, and they go to Antioch actually and send this message that because the people of faith have come into the faith of Israel, they need to follow the laws of Moses, and particularly they need to follow the law of circumcision. And so Paul and Barnabas particularly go to Jerusalem, and they take this up with the leaders of the church there, and there's a big discussion. This is traditionally called the Council of Jerusalem, and it's the coming together of the church in an unprecedented way to settle an issue. Is the church going to follow the laws of Moses, or are they going to not insist on the laws of Moses? This is the big question. Peter himself, who has obviously been the one who opened the door, opened the gate to the Gentiles at the house of Cornelius, appeals and says, look, God poured out his Holy Spirit on the Gentiles. He didn't ask of them circumcision. And why would we ask the Gentiles to carry something that we ourselves haven't carried well and we ourselves haven't responded to, that's been a burden to us? Why would we put that yoke on them? Paul and Barnabas then speak up about what they have seen in their ministry to the non-Jews across across Cyprus and across Asia Minor and in Antioch, and they are received and they are listened to gladly. Then James, who is the brother of Jesus and leader of the church in Jerusalem, stands up and he kind of brings the whole thing to a conclusion, and he summarizes. And he says, look, it seems not right that we should lay on the people of the Messiah Jesus, that is, those whose hearts have been made pure by faith. This is one thing he says, they've been made pure by faith. We should not be laying on them these requirements. After all, he says, this is what Amos the prophet in Amos 9:11 promised would happen, that the tabernacle of David would be restored and that the nations would be brought in. Now that's an interesting reference as well, because the tabernacle of David is obviously the new tabernacle that David established, focused in worship, not like the old tabernacle of Moses, which was left at Shiloh. So there's something here that the apostles say is happening, which is completely new. There's a restoration of the tabernacle of David. And therefore they request of the Gentiles to keep only very minimal and quite cultural restrictions to be in agreement, to be able to continue in fellowship. First of all, they are to abstain from sexual incontinence, from what's traditionally called fornication or sexual sin. They are to abstain from idolatry, anything to do with idolatry, and that includes eating strangled sacrifices, strangled animals, or blood. And the reason those two are in there is because pagan sacrifice often involved eating things that were strangled or eating the blood of animals to try and get their power. And so this was to disassociate from any sort of idol practices that Gentiles might be involved in. There's obviously great rejoicing about this. A team is sent from Jerusalem, where the council has been happening, up to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas returning. And they also send Judas, Barsabbas and Silas, who go to back up what's been said by the apostles, because obviously Antioch has been in turmoil with these Judaizers, as they're called, coming in. And so they communicate to the people in Antioch the contents of the letter which the council in Jerusalem has written, which has been sent to them by the hands of this team who's coming. And it also says that Silas and Judas Barsabbas are prophets, and they encourage the church there as well. That must have been a great encouragement to receive word from the Lord after they've been through such a time of turmoil. And Paul and Barnabas also continue there in Antioch. This is a really good outcome for the whole church because it respects those of the Jewish persuasion, the Jewish tradition who want to continue in keeping the laws of Moses. It's not forbidding the keeping of the law of Moses, but it's not laying them on those Gentile Christians who are not part of ethnic Israel, other than these simple things which are there there as basic necessities, really, for keeping to the law, keeping clean before God. And so these pure hearts of faith now don't need to follow the rites of circumcision. Obviously, Paul himself takes this up in the letter to Galatians. There's some suggestion that Galatians might have been written just before this Council of Jerusalem, and around AD 49, and it might be one of the earliest letters. But whatever happens, we can rejoice that we do not have this yoke laid upon us, that we are free to know Jesus because of his grace alone. Have a very good June the 23rd.